Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. Have you ever dreamed of living out the ultimate James Bond experience, by which I of course mean running through central London karate chopping the air on a mission of utmost espionage-related importance, all while being pestered by messages from Q Branch?
I must be dreaming.
No, you aren't, Sean. 007 Shadow of Spectre is a real thing. It's a treasure hunt-style experience that you play through your phone and by exploring various locations throughout London. The game comes from Hidden City, which described the experience as so on their website. In collaboration with the producers of the James Bond films, 007 Shadow of Spectre is a treasure hunt-style game which blends interactive gameplay with real-world exploration. Become an MI6 agent and work with Moneypenny, Q Branch, and other characters to solve a trail of clues left by Bond in an attempt to outsmart Spectre. Your assignment awaits. From when this was first announced and I was reading about it, I was thinking like, oh my god, this is totally up my street. These kind of games I play quite frequently, usually when I'm on holiday in a new city, and it's a good excuse to explore, I think. I mean, in this case, I've lived in London for over a decade, so I knew that I wasn't going to get much out of the exploration thing, but hey, it's James Bond, and all that I saw and read online, I thought that this looked really cool, so on May 4th, me and my partner booked ourselves in to play Shadow of Spectre. Now, before I get into it, just a disclaimer up front, I was not doing this as part of a promotional day, I was not invited along as a freebie or anything like that. Me and my partner paid for our tickets, and it was a random Saturday afternoon that we picked to play the game. I feel that it's important for me to say this, given some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So the game starts at the National Theatre in London on the South Bank. It's right next to the Thames, a really nice location, and by the time your game starts, you book in a particular time. We booked in for a 3:30 slot. When you sign up to play the game, you'll be sent some messages confirming your team name and such. We were Team Nightfire, and as expected, much of the narrative plays out over messaging. You'll quickly be put in touch with Moneypenny and Q, and they'll be telling you things like, okay, well, you need to head to this location and that location and such. The story is all about aiding them in their investigation. James Bond was involved, Spectre's involved. I'm not going to spoil too much of the story, but it's not all, like, it doesn't all take place over the app. I was actually quite surprised at how many, like, physical props there are, how many physical props you come across while playing the game. I was anticipating that there would be a certain amount of physical props and what have you, but I was very much impressed, actually, by just how much I came away with. Like, James Bond's Universal Exports business card here. Generally speaking, I felt that the whole thing worked with the 007 brand really well, like right down to the messages that you receive from the likes of Q and Moneypenny. Like, you can kind of, or at least I was hearing the messages as I was reading them in the voices of, like, Naomi Harris and Ben Whishaw. I thought that the attention to detail regarding the character was really spot on. So yes, we started our game around 3:30 at the National Theatre. Off we go, it's a beautiful day, we're doing the first few puzzles, and it quickly becomes apparent that something is wrong. We're arriving at the first couple of spots where we need to go, and there are sizable crowds there in these spots, so they're obviously playing the game as well, and everyone's just, like, stood around with their phone out, like, just kind of waiting for the next message, like, where do I go next? What do I do? And it quickly became apparent to us that there was clearly some kind of system error. This was a really nice May Day. The weather has been pretty bad here in London for much of this year. But this was a particularly nice day. It was a Saturday. Maybe that was a factor, like maybe they just had more people playing, maybe it was at capacity, and that was what was causing the messaging system to slow down. But it's problematic because the whole thing is like you're relying on the messages to kind of tell you where to go. So for instance, one of the first things we came across is it tells you to go to this particular point, and you have to figure out a number. It's involving James Bond's business card, and as you can see, there are sort of half of digits here, and you have to figure out the code, and then you have to message it, and then when you get the correct code, that will give you, you'll get another message, a follow-up saying like, okay, well now you need to head down there, and what have you. So we figure out this puzzle, and we send the number, and then we're stood around waiting with everyone else, and this was pretty much par for the course for what ended up being the first third of the game, which took us about as long to complete as the recommended time, the recommended length for the entire game. The site says that playtime is 2 to 3 hours with optional breaks, which is all well and good. You stop at pubs and bars along the way, and the messaging tells you when you have the optional break time, but because we spent 3 hours on what amounted to just 1/3 of the game, we were kind of forced into a break at the first pub we came across, where we wondered if the break would ever end. And this was a really cool bit as well, because after we'd done the first few things where you need to figure out the number and then you have to go to a phone booth and wait for a call, which again, really cool in theory, if it actually works, like, quickly, but we're stood around, like, waiting, like, 4 or 5 minutes for messages to come through, but you end up at this pub, and it's just kind of this regular London pub, and you have to go to the bar staff and say, like, Moneypenny sent me, and then they give you this case, the case that you see in all of the trailers, and it contains a bunch of documents. I should point out that you don't get to keep the case or the documents. And this is a part of the game where you really get a good insight into the story, which I was really geeking out about, and I thought this is really cool, and there's a bunch of stuff that you have to, like, figure out and what have you, and we did that. We arrived, we got the briefcase, got settled down, did all the stuff that we needed to, and then we ended up just waiting for messages to come through, and then we look around ourselves, and literally the entire pub is full of people in the same situation as us. Everyone's got the briefcase out, everyone's sort of, like, done what they think they need to do, and everyone's just, like, looking at their phones, just waiting. We actually ended up talking to some people at the pub, because people were just, like, walking over to other people being like, have you had, like, what was the last message you got? Because the last one that we had was this, and it's not telling us anything. We even asked the bar staff, because we were like, okay, well, I guess we'll order drinks. And we said to the bar staff, like, is it normally this slow? And the bar lady who was serving us did say that, no, this is the first time it had happened. I mean, it was on her shift, and then she was quick to say it, but it's nothing to do with us, we're just the pub. It's like, yeah, no, it's okay, I wasn't about to complain to you, I was just wondering. I actually still have the messages on my phone, so I can give you an example of how this was all going down. So these were the messages from Moneypenny once we got to the pub. We got the briefcase, and then we had to message a separate number, because you end up messaging several different numbers. There's a Universal Exports, there's a Moneypenny, there's a Q branch, and so on. So we messaged this number saying, okay, we're here. 5 minutes later, Moneypenny messages back saying, asking if it's us. So yes. 5 minutes later, she messages us to tell us to get inside the briefcase, which we'd already done for like 15 minutes ago, and then 5 minutes after that, she messages us again to say that we need to message her once we've opened it, and then there's another 4 minutes until her next text, and then another 4 minutes until she tells us what we actually need to do with it. And then when we did that, she put us in touch with Q on another line, and again, messages were just taking like 4 to 5 minutes to come in, and it was an issue because some of them are just kind of like filler. Like, Q asks you if you're up to the task. You say yes, and so on. And if these messages were coming through in quick succession, like they're supposed to, presumably, I think that this would be really fun. But we ended up being in this pub for over 90 minutes, and my patience was running pretty low. And again, just a reminder that the total time that the game is supposed to take is between 2 to 3 hours, and again, we weren't the only people in this situation. Like I say, we got talking to people in the pub, and some people were having to bail on the game completely. Like, we got talking to this one family, and they were just having to leave because they had dinner reservations at like 7 o'clock and they needed to get to another part of town. And some of them were visiting from a different part of the UK and they were all meeting up as a family to do this thing. It was really sad. I really hope they got their money back. So me and my partner, we're getting through these messages, and we're in a couple of drinks in at this point, and then we get a message saying like, oh, actually, this is one of your scheduled break points. Would you like to pause for 30 minutes? And I nearly punched my thumb through my screen to type the message like, no, we're ready to get going. So bear in mind, like, after this, we're already like 3 hours into a 2 to 3 hour experience. My mood wasn't great at this point, which was a real shame because from that point on, the rest of the game ran wonderfully. Messages were coming through quickly, we were constantly moving, the whole treasure hunt thing around London was really good. You have clues directing you along certain routes, and it's all very cryptic, and you're not quite sure what you're looking for, and then you'll just spot in some random shop window, there'll be a little Universal Export sign or a little Spectre thing, and you're like, oh, that's so cool, and then there'll be a particular puzzle to work out in relation to that. At At one point, we ended up in this, like, rather swanky hotel, which was really cool. The props there were really amazing, and there was one guy who was working at the hotel who I really enjoyed, because clearly the people who work in these hotels and pubs and stuff, it's like they're not paid by, like, the game, you know, this is just their day job, and I guess through some agreement, this, you know, company, they make a deal, and maybe, you know, I guess it helps, you know, trade coming in, right? But there was this one guy on the reception, and we had to go to him and, you know, say a thing to get the next physical thing. I think it was this little Spectre envelope, and he was really cool because you could tell that he was really enjoying it. He was all like, "Ah, yes, we've been expecting you," and then he really played into it. I thought that was quite nice because some people we just had. So some of the bar staff didn't quite have that same effect. You know, you go up to them and say, "Moneypenny sent me," and then they're like, "All right, yeah, here you go, here's the case." And again, yeah, the level of detail of the props, it was kind of mind-blowing actually. Like, I thought that it was really well constructed. The things that they plant in the windows and bars and stuff, it's really rewarding when you're doing it and you're finding it. It's just a shame that we endured those technical problems earlier on, because it just kind of meant that we were kind of done and ready to stop at a certain point. Our whole experience in the end was like nearly 6 hours. I think it was like 5 hours, 45 minutes, something like that, and 3 of those hours were just finishing the first third of the game, which is the easiest part. So I could imagine that, you know, if the messaging was coming through quickly, you could probably do that 3-hour chunk in like half an hour, 45 minutes. And obviously it wasn't just us. Like I say, we saw a load of people in the pub having the same issue, and we'd even got chatting with this one particular couple. We kept bumping into them. We bumped into them several times throughout the day, and they finished pretty much the same time as us. They got to the final task that you need to do just like 5 minutes before us or whatever, and they set off around a similar time. So that made me feel a lot better, because towards the end I was just like looking at looking at my watch, seeing how long it had taken us to do this. I was just thinking, are we idiots? Are we morons? So we actually complained after the game had finished, because, you know, we had plans, because we were like, okay, well, we'll be finished by, you know, 7 o'clock at the very latest, and we'd made arrangements that we had to cancel because we needed to finish the game. And it is the kind of thing that, you know, it's not like Secret Cinema where you can do it multiple times and have a different experience. This is kind of like you do it once and it is what it is, and that's it. But yeah, we complained, and the Hidden City customer service were actually amazing. They were really good. They were messaging us back on like weekends, and they gave us complimentary tickets to one of their other events. They do other ones. We're totally doing the Sherlock Holmes themed one now.
Holmes.
And I do also have to caveat this by saying, you know, once again, this is just purely the experience that we had on that particular day. I've known several people who have done this. Had no issue whatsoever. It all ran fine. So I guess that what we experienced was an absolute anomaly. And I did feel a bit let down afterwards, because I'd been really looking forward to this. And if it were working great, then I'm sure I would have had a very different video to make. But, you know, particularly even when it got working good, we were just tired and annoyed. It got to a point where I was just getting angry with all the cryptic stuff. It's just like, just tell me where to go. Stop with all of this, all of this riddle me this nonsense. So if you've come to this video looking for a recommendation or not, I guess it's a cautious recommend from me. Like, if I'd have gone a day earlier or later, maybe, where they presumably didn't have these tech issues, I'd be singing Glory to Thee right now, but this is the experience that I had, and it ended up being a real mixed bag due to technical issues. The worst bit was when we were in that swanky hotel, and at some point that was another, like, break point where you get a message saying, like, oh, you have an optional 30-45 minute break here if you want, and then they send you you have a code for discounts on the cocktail bar and, you know, martinis and stuff. And I was like, oh, if we hadn't been so late, because we were like at a point where, like I say, like, I think we ended up finishing at like 9:30, something like that. So we were getting to a point where we were like, oh, if we need to get to a pub by a certain time, might it be closed? So we were really like kind of feeling the pressure to get it finished towards the end. But this menu looked so good and the hotel looked so nice, and I could have quite happily sat there with a Vespa for half an hour if we'd have gotten there about, you know, 3 hours earlier, but no, I had to come home and pour myself a Vesper here instead. Please, please, please message me down below if you have played this game and what your experience with Shadow of Spectre was. Like I say, literally no one else that I have spoken to who did the game had the same issues that I did, so I'm curious to know if anyone else did run into any similar issues. Please do let me know in the comments below. I guess I was just in the unlucky slot that Raoul Silver or Boris Grecian Co managed to hack into. But yeah, do let me know below. Also below are links to the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button, so do click both of those to stay up to date on future video uploads, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.